Welcome everybody to the Sierra Mastermind. Today's Thursday, July 20th. The year is 2023. We've got a great topic today about identifying high intent leads. Listen, back in 2020, 2021, parts of 2022, this was probably not a topic that was top of mind for everyone, but in a low inventory market, high interest rates, this is something that we just have got to be dialed in on, which is how do we make sure that we do not miss any opportunities, new leads, existing leads, that we have the proper framework to be able to understand when someone is saying and raising their hand, look at me, and then actually looking at them and communicating effectively. So let's start off, before we get into our guest today, let's start off with a poll, which is multiple choice, and it is for you to tell us, what does it mean that a lead is high intent? Does it mean a single choice? You got to choose one. A lead who performs an action that demonstrates true intention, however you define that. A lead who is ready to transact in the next 1 to 6 months. It's a timeline thing. Or tell me more because I really don't know, and no embarrassment on that third one because that's why we're here. All right, we've got a couple of special guests today. First, I want to introduce Scott Selverian, who is the Strategic Services Manager here at Sierra Interactive. Scott, tell us about you, where you're at, and your background, and anything else you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Robert. Scott Selverian, I've been in the industry as an agent for about 17 years now, licensed in 2 states, New Jersey and Colorado. A lot of experience, as a single agent, running teams, former temporary coach. So pretty deep knowledge of the industry in general. I've been with Sierra for the past year, and I'm heading up the customer success teams and the strategic services team.
It's good to have you here, Scott. We also have with us Greg Dallaire, also known as Green Bay Greg. He's the broker owner at Dallaire Realty in Wisconsin. Greg, tell us about yourself, your background, your business setup, et cetera.
Yeah, sure. I started selling real estate in 2006. In 2011, I launched an independent real estate brokerage, Dallaire Realty. We're based in Green Bay. We have our coverage in Appleton and Oshkosh surrounding. Started with just me, but over time we organically grew, and now we have 12 full-time agents and 3 full-time support staff. Over time it's technology has been a big foundation of our company. So we have a pretty intense tech stack that has changed over time, and super excited about that. Super excited to be here. And I was also a coach in prior life, from helping people utilize platforms to the fullest extent and trying to increase conversion and all that good stuff. Great team around me. And it's not like we started with just me and then we went to 12. It's been a really cool journey. But consistently, we've averaged between 43 to 51 sales per agent for the last 6 years. And a big part of that is because of our support admin team. We have an inside sales agent who's been with us for 7 years. We have a closing coordinator who manages a ton of transactions thanks to some great technology. And then we have Tom, our listings manager, who basically, our agents don't do anything other than sign a listing contract, communicate with clients. Everything else around them is done for them so that they can do 43 to 51 units per year. So excited to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. And so a couple real estate coaches, 3 coaches here, if you count me having coached U8 and U6 soccer this past spring. All right, let's look at those poll results. Poll 1 results. What does it mean that a lead is high intent? 54% of you say an action that the lead performs. 46% of you think it's about the timing, a lead who is ready to transact in the next 1 to 6 months. None of you said you didn't know, and that's fine. We'll talk about the timing and the actions both today, and maybe some other things as well. So Greg, I'm going to start with you and say, today we're talking about identifying high intent or hand raiser leads. So we like to do this, 1 word, 1 sentence. What, in your opinion, if you were to find 1 word, 1 sentence, what is a high intent lead?
It's somebody that has specific, like scheduling a showing, like the further down the funnel. I mean, like that, those are or if they're calling a yard sign, like the intent is there that they want to talk to somebody right then and there. It's not that they registered on a Google pay-per-click opportunity. It's that they're already in your funnel and they've actually said, hey, I want to go see a property. I want to call off a yard sign, or, inquired about a mortgage, those types of things.
So would you say like one word would be like eager or urgency, something like that?
Urgency would be the
Urgency.
Yeah.
What about you, Scott? How would you define a high intent lead?
Yeah, I would go along with what Greg said, and it's specific higher intent actions, right? Like it's not necessarily maybe looking at a property a couple times on your website, but more clicking the schedule a showing button. Those higher intent actions. And I would say, along with urgency is high motivation.
Okay. So we'll say action, specificity, and what was the last thing? Higher motivation?
High motivation.
High motivation. If we put a hyphen, then we can count that as one word.
There you go. And I know
So-
you'll do that for me.
So a sense of urgency performs specific actions and higher motivation. So it's a lead that is saying, look, I'm doing something that tells you that I may have some urgency. I may be highly motivated. And so it's up to us, it's up to y'all to be able to identify those actions and then act accordingly. So let's go ahead. Speaking of actions, let's go ahead and go to our second poll. And let's go through the list, multiple choice. And that is, what's an action the lead might perform, in your opinion, that demonstrates high intent? Is it a lead that fills out a home valuation form on your website, returns to your website after a long time away, comes from a specific lead source, such as Zillow or any other Google local services, some other source that you've identified, favorites a property on your website, submits a showing request, clicks consecutive listing alerts, runs a mortgage calculation, adds you to a group text, good article in Broke Agent Media about that, or something else. And if it is something else, be sure to explain in the comments, and you can grab as many of those options as well. Scott, before we start talking about what the actions, because we'll come back to this. Before we start talking about those actions, though, I want to talk about why this matters. Why does knowing that a lead has urgency, has a specific intent, why does that matter?
Well, the whole goal of this entire business is to help people buy and sell homes, right? So we need to funnel through, and everybody probably can appreciate this, we need to funnel through a lot of people, leads, information to be able to identify the small percentage of those people that are higher intent. And that is the job, right? Like it's a full-time job to be able to do that. So having the skills to be able to identify those people with higher intent, or the technology or the tools to be able to help you identify those people, is the key to the business.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Greg?
I think there's a couple layers to it. Obviously, you've got to identify and find those pain and pleasure points to try to find the true motivation. I think that when you're prospecting, obviously finding intent from a global database thing is still extremely important, and that's where you should probably be focusing your, prospecting efforts. But when you do find the pain and pleasure points and truly do find that motivation that a client is motivated, I think you have to be on top of all of the intent and also create intent and provide more value to these customers through using Sierra and providing, expertise, but options for them that they're not aware of. And, it's amazing to me, even just practicing what I preach, using the platform, to have like the people that I have in Prime, and how quickly I am to react to a couple of days ago, there was a property that hit. It was perfect. It was acreage. It was in the price range, square footage, fit the family well, pictures look great. And within like seconds of it hitting, I saw it. I texted them, but if I didn't have the pain and pleasure points that they want to relocate from North Carolina to be closer to family, I wouldn't have been able to be able to provide value almost in real time. But it's not like from a global database perspective, I think the people that are active in your database obviously provide an opportunity to have higher level conversations. I mean, there's companies that are doing just that, attached on to some of these things, and behavioral stuff. And we used to play what's called the now bar. Like we were like the original creators of like the now bar game. And it was all like a reactive to what they had done on the website. And I think a combination of reactive to also proactive is like kind of the magic sauce. But don't forget that once you truly have somebody scrubbed and you know their motivation, that you are driving intent too.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. And this got me thinking. When I think about high intent leads, I'm typically thinking about a more passive way of a lead does something and you've got the tools and everything in place to be able to identify those and react. But you're talking about creating that intent as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? How you create intent?
Yeah. So if I know their pain and pleasure points and I know that they're really, truly motivated within the next 45 days to do a transaction, one of the very first things I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure in the bottom left of Sierra that I'm going to click the CC me on the listing alerts. So that I always have my listing alerts as soon as it hits the new on site, like that, the option, like I want them to get, as long as my e-alert's not too vague, which right now you can get away with having vague e-alerts because there's just not a lot of inventory, but I will CC myself on those emails. And I'll tell you like that house in Luxembourg with 2 acres, prime example. And I mean, I have it, I could even show it on the screen, that lead and show what I did. And it's not rocket science. But I freaking immediately texted that person. And within seconds, she's like, oh my God, this is perfect. It ended up being rode hard and put away wet. Ended up not being the option, but we were there. But they feel like you're working for them. I always tell my team is that if you're going to let e-alerts do your job, you're not going to have a job in the future.
Super. And to follow up on that, yeah, super interesting. I did that years ago where when I had downtime, and Greg, I'm sure you did this too, and we didn't have the technology to be able to support that, that's what I would do for my higher level clients is I would go through the MLS every single day, see what properties match, and then send it to them automatically, even though they were getting the searches from the MLS. Now we can use technology to, to automate that a little bit more and, help us stay in front of it. But 100%, Greg, that's one of the key tools that agents should be using.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say like for me, I'm constantly like when I am prospecting and looking at my prime or looking at, a category-based prospecting, I'm always going into their search as a suggest listing type of functionality. And I'm looking at what they haven't looked at to see if I know the client really, really well, I'm not going to send them a crappy property that doesn't really fit their stuff. Obviously you need sometimes properties, but if somebody I haven't talked with or reconnected with in a while, I will definitely suggest listings, or I'll use that suggest listings feature to use that as bait in the text message. Like I'll go grab the address and then text it to them, with usually some type of like personalized message if I have, previous conversation with them. But the biggest thing for me, when I have these high intent, like you said, I always want to be copied on their e-alerts. But I'm also like with the new reverse prospecting tool where you've got the ability to look in the MLS. And, you can use that tool as well to try to identify, maybe obviously the tool's kind of designed for your own listings, but now that you have the functionality to be able to search the full MLS, those are things where you can provide value and find those options. Or, for this client, I think going on Facebook Marketplace, trying to find those FSBOs and be like, hey, have you seen this one? Or like really trying to show these people that and making them feel like you're working for them, And yes, e-alerts are great. They drive traffic, they drive repeat traffic. But if you think that those are all, going back a couple of years when everything was a little bit different, where the e-alerts were kind of doing your job and then you were just waiting for the cream to rise to the top. I think a lot of teams across the country, mine included, like, don't think that I'm on some fairyland thing. I still have all of the problems everybody else does. And I do have a team with a lot of tenure where they want to work past client. They want to work Sphere because those leads aren't, a lot of them built their databases on internet leads and then got to the point where they got and do a great job of providing great customer service, all of our other things that we do. But if you're not working the internet lead game in a time like this or consistently working it, it takes a lot of momentum to get that built back up. But you can, with these types of tools, kind of reconnect. You can even say, hey, I apologize, I dropped the ball. Like, it's been a while, you know, I was looking this morning, found this house that I think might be a great fit for you. Are you even still looking, right?
You know, I didn't think that you're in a Fairland, Greg, but I was surprised to hear that you are selling property in Europe with Luxembourg. So that was cool to hear. It's different Luxembourg, I'm sure. It's interesting you said around not when you identify those leads. I mean, Scott used the language of your top clients, I think was the language from years ago. Those are leads you have already identified as high intent in some form or fashion, right? And then you're doing some actions like CC on listing alerts. Let's come back to that in a little bit. Let's go to our poll results. The second poll, which is for y'all to tell us what you think identifies a high intent lead. What actions they perform. 7% fills out a home valuation form on your website. 14% returns to your site after a long time away. Nobody based on specific source or favorites a property on your website, but 71% of you saying if a lead submits a showing request that demonstrates high intent. 0% listing alerts, mortgage calculations, 0. I'm sure we'll get a pushback from you on that one, Greg.
Oh, you knew it.
Add you to a group text, 7%. All right. So let's go ahead and get y'all's opinion as we're in this mastermind and we're talking about it. It's good to have different opinions. Greg, in your opinion, what actions does a lead perform? And maybe not the full comprehensive list, but maybe the top 2, 3, 4 that in your opinion demonstrates high intent. And why do you think that? Do you have data? Do you have experiences? Is it just intuition? What is it in your opinion that says, hey, the lead is saying, hey, look at me?
Yeah, so one of my really good friends, Jesse Bodwin from Call Action, we had exported basically all of the internet leads that we had converted in a couple of years. And we actually manually, this was a painful, arduous process, and it's not like perfect by any means, but we tried to figure out on those internet leads if there was any types of patterns. And to say that one specific thing, I think it would be disingenuous to say that one specific action is what created the intent. What we found in manually looking at all these internet leads that actually went to the closing table was that there were some patterns. And it was a culmination of multiple actions. You know, on that poll, it said had returned back to the site. I would say that's a good, you know, way to reconnect with somebody, but I don't necessarily know that that's fully high intent, because the problem is our sites are so strong in the email deliverability that a lot of people are coming back to the site. But if somebody looks at a property 5 times, somebody also favorites that property, or if they calculate a mortgage, because I had run in a previous tool, ran a report just on the fly, and I sorted by latest communication. You saw it. And the only activity that I really looked for was mortgage calculation. And I sorted by latest communication, and boom, it was near the top. The top like 3 were actually writing offers with our team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's, I don't think there's any just one. If you said like, what is the number one thing right now that would, from an action on the site, I would probably say looked at the property 5 times.
Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting. When you're reverse engineering, you're looking at a combination of actions. So it's not just that they favored a property. It's not just that they looked at the property multiple times. It could be a combination of actions. Scott, what about you? In your time working with clients, in your time as an agent, what actions does a lead perform that in your experience, your data, your intuition demonstrate, look at me, I'm wanting to make a move?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Robert, that it is a combination of actions, and you do sort of need to interpret these different actions that the lead's taking, right? You know, I think we've all seen leads that look at properties 2, 3, 4 times. They're also, you know, and you know, what I've seen is they are looking at properties that are, you know, $1.5 million, $2 million, $4 million that are more like, wow, this is a cool thing to look at. Let me take a look. So you have to sort of weigh that with what other things what other data you have. You know, when did they register? You know, the things that I look at is what their lead source was, when did they register, and what kind of actions are they taking, right? I think some of those more intentional actions to me are you know, I would agree with the crowd, is the showing request and the home value form. You know, home value form, like if somebody's going to take the time to put their information in there and don't already know that they're going to get a call from somebody, That to me is intentional. So.
Yes. Okay. So that's an interesting point because nobody agreed with you out of the folks that voted. Granted, smaller sample size than the whole wide world. But a home valuation form to you, if they are actually, so it's not just running a property valuation necessarily, but like they're filling out their information and they're giving you actual information to you that says I am high intent.
Yes.
Okay. And that's about the actual giving of the real information, or what else?
Yeah, I think it's the person actually spending the time to provide the real information to me leads to higher intent. Right now, there's always the one-offs where I was just curious about what it would be in this market, and I'm not really planning on moving until I die, or we all get that too. But to me, that's a higher intent lead than somebody returning the site after a long time. I mean, honestly, I see people that come back to my site after 1,500 days. Happens all the time, right? And they're still not doing anything but maybe poking around a little bit, and then they'll disappear for a while longer. So yeah, it's just you have to sort of weigh the different actions.
And I'm curious from your perspective, Scott, because I think there's really kind of two ways to look at this, at least two. One being Lee doesn't necessarily going to fill out all this information. I should ask for the bare minimum. And then the opposite. Hey, I want to make sure that I get only the most high intent leads. I'm going to make them fill out a ton of information. And if they make it all the way through, that means that I really should pay attention to them. Do you kind of, from your perspective, in your experience working with clients, is there a balance to strike there? Or do you push people one to the other? Does it depend on the market?
I think to me, it depends on, if I was coaching somebody, it would depend on the client that I'm coaching and how they run their business and really what their preference is. I don't personally have a preference either way. It's kind of like, it's subjective, to be honest with you. It's however you want to do it. Some people like getting more volume of leads in because they feel they can follow up with them more. And, maybe it's a longer term game, but they've got the processes in place to follow up with those. Great, bring in the volume. If you don't have that in place and you really only want specifics, understand that more than likely, the volume isn't going to be there and the cost is going to be a lot higher. However, the intent may be higher along with that cost. So,
okay, that's a good insight. Let's look at are we ready for our results? Are we ready to do this results? Poll 3. Oh, no, it's not results. It's poll number 3. We've already done that. Let's look at poll number 3. That's what I needed. I needed a new poll. Poll number 3, multiple choice. What do you do when you've identified a high intent lead? What do you actually do about it, right? When you identify them, do you call them, text them, email them, tag them, nothing, or something else? And explain in the comments. I would love to get some comments from people. And by the way, since we're here, tell us where you're at when you do it. All right, so let's ask you, Greg, how do you think differently? And Scott actually talked about this just a little bit a moment ago around your business setup and the processes that you have in place or not. How do you think differently about, or if at all, when it comes to intent between new leads that are coming into your CRM in some form or fashion versus existing leads? Is there any different kind of mindset that you have when you're thinking about intent, or is it all the same?
Well, I just want to spotlight what Scott was saying about like the cell form. I've been on Sierra for I think 7-8 months, and I've actually had multiple people actually fill out the cell form. And previously, I never even had a lot of that traffic coming through. And by far and away, like somebody does like a home valuation, types in their address, I feel like the intent on that is actually very, very low. Somebody goes through and fills out that form or submits a showing request. And like I was saying, what I had said is the actions on the site, if I had to choose, it'd be like out of all of them, I would choose the 5 things. But the contact form and the schedule showing request, one of the beautiful things about Sierra that I was like in love with was that the manager view, because I have obviously inside sales agents, but also the ability, and I want to make sure people on this call understand that if you are a team leader or if you're even a small team, somebody needs to hold you accountable. And there is an option in the notifications section that allows you to actually email somebody else when those high intent moneymaker, increase your conversion percentage actions happen, that you're immediately on it. And it's like from a management of the business, and my ISA is more in charge of the manager view, but he also gets the emails too. And I see them, and I'm constantly holding our agents accountable, but we're also cognizant of, because we've had this problem where agents are out in the field, and that's obviously like, we believe in like a support system and stuff, but it's growing. So I'm like really happy that we have the ability, because I actually had to like manually create that previously. So, and I know for you guys, it's like, oh yeah, that's been there. That's great. But when you don't have that and you build it yourself, and then you're just like, oh, it's baked in and you can see it right away. It's super powerful. And so if you're going to the notification sections, make sure you look at that on the submitted contact form submission. And there's probably 2 or 3 of them. Once you have the option turned on, because you do have to turn the option in the settings, you can actually email almost anything you want to go to somewhere else.
Right. Do you think differently about when you're thinking about intent? Do you think differently about some of those new leads that are coming in versus existing leads in your database?
Absolutely. Like if they've been in or if they've taken like the actual action of that, I expect our agents to call them quickly. Nothing like, we actually had a Google organic lead come in, which I love. And we really don't have registration turned on for that. So the problem was the new leads were getting mixed up with the Google organic, and this actual Google organic lead actually submitted a showing request. They were never forced to register. After they look at a house like 4 times, then it would be like, hey, do you want to create an account? Well, this person had actually submitted a showing, and it was sitting in new, and it was driving me bonkers. And normally, like, somebody's got to be the fallback, but the agent I was signed to was out in the field. It was one of those scenarios. But obviously our support team stepped in and helped in that exact scenario. But you better believe it, like we are like on that. If we get a property showing request for any of our teammates, like we want to make sure that it's done. And that's the big thing for us, is like, if you use Sierra like the way it's intended to be used, I don't want to micromanage any of my staff. I don't want to be the big accountability. Why didn't you do this? I just want you to do it in the system so I don't have to ask you. Does that make sense? But yeah, for all of these existing leads, I feel like that's where a lot of the gold is. And I think even us right now are struggling with the volume of new leads coming in, where we lose sight of the gold. And I know like the average days for us back in the day was like 377 days to go from new lead registering to actual closing. And then I'm getting all upset with my agents about them not calling the new leads. And it's funny, we're actually in the midst of a potential change, and we've gone almost every way you could. We've had it where the ISA handled it all. We've had it where the agents handle it all. We've had like a hybrid, and those are very, very important decisions to make, but they can also be very, very damaging to your team and your business. So you have to be very, very careful on what you do when you do that.
So yeah, so Scott, I wanted to ask you, I mean, we talked about speed, we're gonna talk about this later, but let's just do it now. One of the common themes I heard from Greg when he thinks about new leads and existing leads is speed for both of them. Do you think speed to lead for new leads has changed over the course of time? Is it as important as it has always been? And do you think differently when it comes to speed when you're thinking about new leads and existing leads who show intent?
Yeah, for sure. I do feel it's changed. Back definitely when I was coaching, which is a couple of years back, and before that, everybody was preaching speak the lead. You got to be the first one there. You got to be the first one there. I think it honestly depends on the lead source, right? Like, the higher intent lead source is the Google local service ads, the Zillow, things like that. There is, speed to me does have a factor there, right? And it's also the conversation that you're having, right? Those types of leads, you're probably reaching out and having a very specific conversation with them because the intent is higher, right? So you want to get there first. With a Google pay-per-click lead, I don't think speed is quite as important. And like Greg, like I'm testing things out constantly too, and changing things up. Not too constantly, because you do want to build some consistency, but I think we all know the Google pay-per-click leads are, the conversation is more an introduction and letting them know you're there to help, as opposed to, hey, I saw you came in on my website, looked at this property, let's go see it. But more than likely, their intent is going to be a lot lower. So I think the speed does need to be throttled with the source. And as for your existing database and people who are taking these actions that we're saying are higher intent, that's absolutely, speed has got to be a part of the game. without a doubt. They schedule a showing request, man, you better be in front of them immediately. Use your automations as much as possible, but you better be picking up that damn phone to back up those automations, to have a conversation with that person and find out a little bit more.
So at that point, the lead source isn't the first thing you check when you see
Not at
somebody performing high intent action, right?
Not if they're already in the system, if they've been there for a little while. I mean, look, if they were a pay-per-click lead that came in, a week ago, I may take that into consideration. But still, if they're scheduling a showing request, I'm acting on that quickly.
Mhm.
Yeah, every
Especially
single
if
alarm
they're
bell
already-
should be, every single alarm bell, you're creating every, like Zillow, not like Zillow, I don't care. But the fact of the matter is you're paying a higher dollar per lead because those people have gotten to the point where they're actually scheduling a showing request. So if you're paying $400 in your market for a Zillow opportunity, when you have a scheduled showing request come in, you need to treat it as such. You just created your own $300 to $400 lead source. And for us, like with Sierra, one of the beautiful things is with, the ability to have these phone numbers. You want a higher intent lead. You want to create your own Zillow leads. If you actually have listings, which is, I know, very, very hard, but I was showing this to you, Robert, in our agent reporting dashboard. We had created a Sierra phone number that when somebody called our office line and says, hey, press 1 to have our team sell your home, press 2 if you have questions about a property in this market. Every single one of those calls is a Zillow call, as far in my mind, as valuable or more valuable, because guess what? They're probably calling off of your stuff. Same thing with yard signs, like Jesse with call action, where when we have a yard sign, my phone lights up Green Bay yard sign. The call's recorded, the call's automatically put into the CRM and all that stuff. And you can do that with Sierra as well to create these higher intent. And as far as like brand new leads, I don't like smothering them in the first few seconds. But if they're, like we had one that we were reviewing today, we were actually messing with the pond feature and functionality, we're doing some testing on that. But there was a lead that had a favorited a property. So my initial conversation, would be definitely bringing up that property, but I'm not all for smothering them. I'd rather educate them and provide value to them about how to use our website, how to use our future app that we're going to have, which will actually generate more higher intent opportunities and push them directly into Sierra.
It's an interesting point you bring up, and didn't say this explicitly, but it's similar to like running a sprint, but having your full breath when you get to the finish line. Speed to lead does not mean speed to response, does not mean pressure on the lead, right?
Amen.
It means you get to them quickly. It doesn't mean that you are all, to use your word, smothering them right away. You want to get there, but you want to make sure that you're getting there in the right kind of a way. I've got a couple questions for you in the chat, Greg. Carlos asks, does your ISA handle it all? And Candy similarly says, hi, I'm curious if you were training in-house ISAs or using a company, an ISA service.
Yeah, so we don't use like a third-party company. We actually, one of our ISAs has been with me for 7.5 years, was originally trained by a friend of mine named Adam Bailey. He's a big call center type guy, just freaking lively, just a great guy. And he actually, I hunted this guy down. He wasn't coaching at the time, but I knew he was running this call center, and I was like, man, you should be training. So actually Chris, we call him Tandan in our company. He was the first guy ever trained by Adam Bailey. As far as Carlos's question, does your ISA handle it all? I'm one of those leaders that I want to practice what I preach. So my hands are pretty immersed into the system. I think at some point in a few years when we figure out, and the thing I always say to people is the minute you think you have this figured out is the minute you get your ass kicked. So I'm constantly on, I've watched, GGMS training, forums. I've watched, I'm trying to always learn and get better. As far as does he handle it all? Yes, he's definitely the fallback, hands down. And he's got his eyes on the system. And moving 70,000 plus opportunities from one system to another is a massive, massive change. And we, still there's still things that we need to complete, but yeah, the ISA is definitely in there, but I'm also looking at it because I need to understand exactly how it works so that I can train in the future, and I want to know it inside and out, backwards and forwards, so that I can get as much value out of Sierra as possible to convert more leads. Because if you use the system and you become an expert level at the system and you actually do use it, you're going to convert more leads.
Yeah, and along those lines, and one of the things I didn't mention around in the beginning is I actually still run it. I've been running Sierra for 5 years before I joined the company. I still run a Sierra system remotely. So to get to Candy's question, I personally currently am using an outside ISA service. Just started them recently, so I don't have a lot of great feedback on them because they're just started. But that being said, I mimic Greg. Like, I'm in the system not constantly because I'm working for Sierra, but nobody's controlling the system more than me. And to Greg's point previously is if they don't do it, if my guys don't do it in the system, it's not done. Like, they know everything has to be done in the system, so I have visibility into it. And we can coach and work on things that need to be worked on because I can see what's going on in the system. So
Yeah, and so the next question from Carlos is really interested in ISA stuff, which is great. He says, how many ISAs do you have? Do you let your agents get new leads at all, or are they getting assigned ISAs and then out from there? Scott, I'm going to let you answer first. You're using an ISA service. You can talk about how many ISAs in the second question, but it might be helpful to say how big is your lead database?
yeah, so I have a much smaller lead database. I'm at about 5,000 or 6,000 leads, and I work with one agent partner. So pretty lean operation. So right now, and I've tried every single way. I've had multiple agents. I've had, like everything. So, and I have extenuating circumstances. I don't live in the market I work in and things like that. So that being said, I have one ISA, one agent. The ISA, all new leads are going to the ISA. They're not going to the agent. So I'm trying to design it in a way that my agent, like Greg, is out there in the field closing deals, and my ISA is managing the database. I say that loosely, and surfacing the deals to pass to the agent. That's the goal.
What about you, Greg? How many leads do you have in your database? So that would probably be helpful to know.
73,000. I have 12 full-time agents. I have one ISA, and we are, so that's the thing. Like, I'm warning you on this, and Scott knows like where I'm going to go with, like, I've done it all the different ways. And I can tell you, when you have the ISA get all of the leads, your ISA, no matter how good they are, when they have a massive number of like 70,000 leads, they're going to cherry pick off the top. Same thing, we have the problem with our agents, and we're slowly building back momentum the other way, where, hold on. And the other question was like, do you get new leads? Do they all get new leads? So right now, as we have it, we actually disperse the leads based on, like, over the weekends, we ask who wants to be on leads so they can actually call them. The ISA is definitely like more of a hybrid fallback in our, system. However, we are, we actually, my ISA was so proactive that he created a pond and started testing the Sierra pond feature to see if we could get people to start, acting quicker. But yeah, I'm not a proponent of just giving the ISAs all of the stuff. In Scott's use case and his scenario, I think it works perfectly. But I also want the agents to know how to hunt. Like, they've got to go out and kill their own food. Like, I still scrub leads. I mean, I'm not taking random clients into the field. I work more past client referral, but I'm doing that so that I can teach my agents how to convert these leads better and have better conversations and ask the right questions. Like, even when I was watching Andy Cole, like, the guy will not let you off the phone without answering freaking questions. Like, it's incredible. And like, even for me, like, I know that you have to do that, but seeing it from a different angle is super important.
And I know there seems like there's a lot of questions about ISA. It's actually very helpful to know, and get you a CRM that's built for being able to utilize an ISA, right? Call transfer, group text, lead ponds, collaborator assignment, etc. It sounds like both of you, Scott, with a smaller lead database, your ISA is the drain rock, and Greg, yours larger lead database, your ISA is the perforated drain pipe, but both of you are building the retaining wall. And that analogy tells us who is working on backyard projects. So there you go. We'll do the last question on that just to kind of go, because it's so interesting. But Carlos asked, and let's just go with you, Greg, and then we'll move on. How do you handle stuff after hours? Just reach out in the morning, he says.
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. I have my tenure, hire new hungry agents. If you want to handle stuff after hours, I've got a great team. I wouldn't be where I was or where I am today without that team, just like they wouldn't be where they were without the support of our team. However, people get burnt out. So I would tell you, like, new agents, I'm just, all my friends across the nation always, Greg, you need to hire more agents. You got a great system. I'm like, I do, but still it's more people. But we ask for volunteers, but I'll still come on a Monday morning and there'll be freaking too many opportunities sitting there over the weekend. So that's where we're trying to plug those leaks. And that's been a leak that I've battled. And once we think we have it figured out, the next weekend, more people have stuff going on and it falls through the cracks. However, as long as you're welcome. As long as we make sure that water's not falling out of the boat with the high intent forms or showing requests, that there is somebody watching that in the back burner so that we know that those things get scheduled. I think you can prevent too much water from falling out of your boat or falling into your boat.
When Greg says you're welcome in the middle of his response, he's not just saying it like he's just dropped the mic. Carlos said, thank you. All right. I wanted to ask you, Scott, how do you personally identify high intent leads? How do you find them? How do you identify them?
I don't like personally identify high intent leads.
Working with some automations, you got filters set up in your managed leads, you got notification settings set up. What combination? What do you got?
Personally talking leads, but yeah, so all of the above, right? So like I said, I've been using Sierra for 5 years, so I'm pretty I consider myself relatively knowledgeable on the technology. So leveraging automations, leveraging as much, and especially the way I run my business, because I'm not in it every day and I'm running it remotely, I need to leverage as much automation as possible. You know, it's Carlos's question, like what happens when somebody comes in after hours for me or on the weekends? It's automated responses. I mean, if it's a high intent, if I see somebody put in a showing request, I'm responding to it. But other than that, I'm leveraging action plans, you know, everything that Sierra offers, action plans, notifications, you know, anything like that is how I'm going to respond to it. If somebody can't get on the phone.
Greg, what do you do?
One of my favorite features, and this can get super, like you can get numb to this, like almost in this game, I feel like a lot of our agents get numb to the new leads that come in. I think they get numb to, like they miss the showing requests that come in because they're numb to it. But I will tell you that one of my favorite features of Sierra is basically making sure your notification for the visit of the property 5 times is turned on. I'll have it text me and push notification on the app. And if I know the intent of that user, I use that to my advantage. Like I actually will call based off of that. And the thing I like about that versus what I was using before is it's actually in real time. At first I missed a feature, and then I was like, you know, actually, because I called the person based off their 5 visits and I knew their situation. And I was like, she goes, oh, your ears must be ringing. We were just going to call you to schedule that property. I called her in real time, like pretty close to real time. And this was somebody who was like, hey, I'm going to buy a house for my daughter. I'm not super serious. Looked at the house 5 times. And then boom, I called her and then we scheduled a showing and I ended up scrubbing that and giving it out to our team. But I'm all about creating those type of things. And that's why I'm really excited about this Rooster in this app that we're developing. So we can create push notifications to our users, which will then fuel more of our Sierra database as well. You know, so there's more people getting push notifications just as an additional option instead of just email alerts, but it's connected into Sierra. So if they look at a property 5 times, I feel like that over time, that's going to increase that. More and more people will be looking at properties 5 times. I think people will be favoriting more properties, but I'm going to actually record a quick video in a action plan showing them how to do all these things to try to educate them over that 377-day cycle so that when they are truly ready, hopefully they reach out to us.
Right.
You know?
Keeping them on your site, which means you're able to see what properties they're looking at, what properties they're favoriting. So doing some education, and that's a long-term play, right? So that you said eventually when they are ready to really get serious, you'll be able to track them. You set up those notification settings, you get pinged in multiple places. And you make calls based on it, right? So making sure that you've got everything set up in terms of the system. So again, get you a CRM, whatever it is, that can identify those things. Who's looking at your site? Who's coming back to your site after so long away? Who's clicking consecutive listing alerts? Who's favoriting properties? Who's looking at a single property X or more times? In your case, Greg, it's 5. It can be any number that you've identified. Make sure you got something that sets up so that in an automated fashion, you can identify those leads. And then at the front end, like Greg said, might be worth a little bit of investment just to record a video and set up an automated plan that does some education for those leads so that you can track them on your site. You mentioned rooster. One of my neighbors got a rooster recently. That's not what you're talking about. Rooster is RUUSTER, RUUSTER product that y'all may want to check out. And Greg will be happy to hear from you in the Sierra Facebook Mastermind about how that goes for you. All right, let's do this. Let's go to our poll 3 results. Poll 3. We got those? There they are. What do you do when you've identified a high intent lead? 95% of you say call them. And this is multiple choice, so there's probably some overlap here. 37% text them, 16% say email them, 5% of y'all say that you tag them. None of you said nothing, which is good. All right.
But I would have voted all of the above, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. You do all those things.
All the above. Yep.
So you make sure that you get in front of them. You know, you referred back to the mastermind with Andy Cole, who has just so many. If you missed that mastermind, go back, watch it. It's on the phone. And is the phone, does it still matter? And we argued that yes, it does, and talked at some length about that in and out. But you do all those things just to make sure that you're in front of them. So walk me through. Do you do one in an order? Do you set up a plan that has all those things included? What do you doing, Scott?
Depends on the situation, but a lot of time, I'd say the majority of my stuff is set up so the text and the email and the tag are automated. And then the phone calls, obviously manual. That's typically the way it is. I mean, sometimes the text is manual, depending on the situation, and I forget which one's which, but yeah, for sure.
What do you do, Greg?
I would immediately call. I would leave that would be one of the times that I would leave a voicemail referencing that, and then at the end of the voicemail, I'd say I will send a text as well. And there are times where I will email too, depending if I've had problems getting a hold of them in the past. Most of the people are, when they get to that point, they're usually responsive, but the email is not a bad thing to have on there too, because sometimes they may have blocked your phone number prior to them requesting your stuff. So that might be the only thing that actually gets through.
Right.
People do block your phone numbers. I don't know if you guys know that, but I'm sure you do.
And sometimes they might even forget that they've done it. Is that true, Scott?
That is 100% true. And actually, not only can you block specific numbers, you can block any unknown number on an iPhone. So any number that's not in a contact won't even ring your phone.
So in part, the making sure with that, we talked about speed to response earlier. Part of you doing all of the above is ensuring that you hit some or all communication method that you can to get back in front of them when they perform a high intent action. Yeah,
and also, assuming this is a lead that you haven't had a conversation with, you don't know their preferred method of communication yet, right? So to me, you need to use them all until you can, build a rapport with them and say, hey, what's the best way for me to be working with you going forward? But you don't know, and some people still do prefer email. I mean, they're few and far between, but they do.
Initial appointment. So
what about tags? What is it about that? What's the tag for?
The tag is that's going to help me better manage my database in the future. So depending on the information that comes in, it could maybe it tags them with scheduled showing request or whatever, and then it enables me to sort it and kind of manage the database that way. So depends on the situation, will depend on if and what tag I'm putting on. It could also, getting a little bit into the weeds here, you can use tags that then help populate filters, and then you can have the call, have people populating these filters that then you're calling because they did schedule a showing request, maybe you didn't get a hold of them right away, and you can just build it out that way.
We talked about lead source and how with existing leads, you're not really concerned about it, but there may be some other factors. Like Greg, how do you triage what to do next when you've identified a lead as high intent? Are you looking at the lead? Some leads you're going to know, right? You're going to know, and you're going to say, I know this person. I know exactly their situation. I know exactly how to respond. But some you might not, especially with a lead database that's 70,000 leads, such as yours. How do you triage what to do next when you see that notification come through?
I mean, it's kind of based on the actual notification itself, but if they look at a property 5 times, a lot of times we're using this to re-engage, especially trying to get like re-antiquated from a different system to a new system. using that as like, hey, this is like definitely like almost like a task. They're like, this is your new task, like in real time. Like you need to like either provide value, you need to either suggest other properties to them, or you need to call them and ask them like, hey, I just showed that house. It smells like cat piss, but did you see this other house? You know, I'll text it to you. Like I just get into pure provide value mode every time I get one of those opportunities to see how can I add value instead of just being like, hey, I want to follow up with you. I know you were looking 6 years ago, you know, like I try to bring something to the table, and you can do it pretty quickly, like case by case, like, but these are like your additional to-dos or tasks for yourself. Like look at your notifications in the app, like somebody comes in, yeah, you may not be able to get to it right now, but like, don't dismiss that notification until you do something with it on the mobile app, or, you know.
Get you a CRM with a mobile app that has all of your notifications in one single place. That's another last thing for you there. Scott, what piece of advice would you give to someone who is here, they watched it live, they watched in the future, who wants to go deeper with learning about lead intent and the best, fastest response once they've identified those high intent leads? Do you have a blog post, a book, a YouTube channel, a Facebook group, anything that you'd suggest for them to go deeper?
I don't have any specific places to point people on this topic. I mean, obviously there's a zillion real estate coaches out there. I mean, I think ultimately you do need to sort of, it's as much of an art as it is a science, right? Like you sort of have to feel it through, and you will learn, you know, if you're new in the business, as you start doing it more, you will learn how to interpret it better. But I think we all know there's a million sources of information out there, and I think it's doing what you feel is best. And then to me, it's I've always learned by, I consider myself having a pretty good gut instinct about this stuff. So I'll take my gut instinct and I'll take it one step further, knowing that I could do one thing more. So
what about you, Greg?
So I love this question because I got a couple of books. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He actually, if you go to his blackswangroup.com, he actually has a training class. It's pretty reasonable. It's like 200, well, he changed the price, I think, but it's pretty reasonable. It's like under $500 for his real estate specific Never Split the Difference. Carlos, because I know you had asked the question about if Adam Bailey still offers his service as a trainer. He's a big EXP guy. He's definitely got some type of programs, I'm sure. If you Google Adam Bailey, EXP Realty, he comes up. But I would tell you, before you get there, I would go to Amazon and I would order Never Split the Difference. I would read the book. I feel like that could almost be a foundational. And then I would go to blackswangroup.com. And I'm not plugging this. I don't like work for this company, but I'm just like, it came to my mind as you were talking, Scott. And I was like, hands down, like that will help you ask better questions and not be afraid to like label things and get further on the phone. I feel like hands down, if I was going to focus, like the one book you could read as far as getting better at like talking to people is that book. And then I would take that class.
I would actually take that one step further and say, listen to the book too, because then you can actually hear his late night DJ voice. So those of you who've read it will understand that joke.
It's a great, yeah, or just Google Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just, yeah, exactly what to say. That's another popular one that I actually just got that as a gift.
Yeah, I mean, how many steps further do we get to take this question? Listen, I actually have 2 bonus questions for you each. Okay, are you ready for this? Are you ready? Scott, what's your biggest one that you're willing to share? Maybe mistake dealing with a high intent lead.
Not following up.
Okay.
Just, not
Dropping
reaching
the ball.
time or reaching out and then not following up. I mean, look, I've definitely dropped the ball there, no doubt.
So your biggest mistake is not about, oh, I got there and I gave them too much value or anything like that. It's like that I just never showed up.
Yep.
What about you, Greg?
Not having more leverage in place to give all of our teammates a better life. I think a lot of times when I get these high intent leads, I will be in a place where I just am not mentally ready to do this. And I do think we've built a really good support system around our team, which is why they're as productive as they are. And that's why they've also been with us for a long time. But we're all humans, like, so you better have some type of fail-safe system in place. Like, we're going on a Michigan golf trip next week for 3 days. In Tandan, our ISA, he's going to Michigan with us. So we're building out. I mean, it's not going to be nearly as good as Tandan, but we have emergency fallback places in place so that those high intent leads don't fall through the cracks. And sometimes you got to be okay with that happening. But I'd like to get to the point where we always have a fail safe in place. And there is a lot of leverage that you can get. Like, Scott's got an ISA, managing the way he's inspecting what he expects from his ISA. So he does actually have leverage around him. And there's a lot of different ways to do this.
It's really interesting that you both essentially said, Scott, you from a personal level, Greg, you from a systems leadership level, that the biggest fail around high intent leads was inactivity, which I thought was interesting. You just didn't do it. You didn't have a system in place. You didn't follow up. So let me ask this as a final question for each of you, and that is, I'll start with you, Greg. One of kind of your success stories around quick follow up with a high intent lead.
I mean, it's probably the majority of our conversions, to be honest with you. It's hard for me to pinpoint just one. We jump through the phone, like, especially when we have a really good seller opportunity or a Google local service ad come through, or whatever the source is. I mean, I've got probably 20 of them, but being super proactive on those and actually being fresh to take them creates conversion. Like, so you got to have somebody fresh for those opportunities. I would just say that it allows you to actually be a better agent because you're actually paying attention to what they're doing. I think there was a time when I first started playing the game like this, where I felt like I was going to be that spooky guy that's watching everything they're doing. It's almost gotten to the point where people expect you to be watching what they're doing. There's been a transition on that. So,
Green Bay, big brother. Scott, what about you? What's a success story for you around a high intent lead?
Yeah, I would sort of agree with Greg. I don't know a specific circumstance. I will say, however, the energy and the feeling you get from being successful with a lead that has returned to your site after a long period of time, or registered on your site a long period of time ago and has been visiting forever, like, to respond back to that high intent action and make the connection, get the information, get them out. I mean, even if it's not getting right to the closing, but getting that connection, getting the information after such a long period of time because you acted quickly on the high intent is like a high, man. Right? Because look, at the end of the day, as agents, we all want every lead that comes in to be the closing lead, right? Like, and some of us think they all are. You will soon learn they're not. But that's the name of the game. We want every single one to be like, hey, man, let me take me to show this property. So when it does happen, it's definitely a high for sure.
Yeah, I mean, not every opportunity is like trying to swing at 103-mile-per-hour fastballs, right? Sometimes you're playing church league softball and you get to swing a big bat at a big ball, and that's a good time. It's just about making sure that you are ready to take the swing when somebody pitches it up for you, and making sure that you have the right pitcher in place, that is the systems, to ensure that you are ready to play the game. All right, well, listen, thank you so much, Greg and Scott. If you all joined live, if you all joined in the future, if you're watching this on replay, if you found this helpful, be sure to invite your friends to the next mastermind. We're going to be talking in 2 weeks with our friends Mike Novak and Colton Whitney about agent recruitment. So get ready. Send your feedback. You want to tell us what you want to mastermind about? I think we got one topic today about ISAs. Send your feedback to hello@sierrainteractive.com. Let us know what you want us to mastermind about. And last thing, I do want to tell you that if you are in the market for this kind of great stuff live, then be sure, not just live Zoom, but like in the flesh, join us at Sierra Summit in October 10 and 11, Denver, Colorado. Scott, you'll be there.
I will be there.
Greg, you'll be there.
I'll be there.
I'll be there. All right. So join us. We're going to drop a link into the chat if you want to click to learn more and get all the details. We'd love to see you there. Okay, thanks so much for joining. We'll see you the next time. Thanks.